good debt will allow you to grow, to expand your business, bring in more revenue, right? And the cost of the debt is low, right?
First, I don't know or I didn't know doesn't really fly in the face of IRS or court or any of those things. When you get into business, it doesn't matter. They expect you to understand like the rest of the big boys. You're playing in the big boy arena or the big woman arena, female arena. And there is no room for vacillation. One of the first, one of the, that wasn't the first lesson. I wish I would have learned that lesson as one of the first things that I learned. But one of the first lessons I learned after my adverse business decisions was you need a few people at the table. You need someone that can help you to strategize taxes. That's what you do before you start making money. You need someone to help you understand what to do after you make some money, and those could be one and the same persons depending on their skill set. You need someone to help you manage your money, and the managed money and the operating of the money probably should be separate. That way you don't get into the things that happens with a lot of artists who they have their accountant managing their money too. The persons that's giving you the advice, now you go to the person that's managing, and then you sit down and you have a real conversation. And or they can bring you can bring them with you, and they can explain to the person that's running the portfolio or whatever it is that you're doing. And then you need someone that's going to help you to stay on target with whatever it is that you're trying to build, the operational officer.
Yep.
Because you're a visionary, and visionaries just see the vision and they write a check or they start the plan or they and as a visionary sometimes we fall so much in love with our vision even when the vision cannot support itself. So this is Walking Victory. My name is NaRon Tillman. We sit you at the feet of the masters and have conversations to help you evolve your life. Today, if you are an entrepreneur, we're going to have a discussion not about the operations portion, but some of the things that you need to consider either before you're starting your business or while you're in business. And even some of these things can help you in your personal life. We have an expert with us. Ronika, how are you?
I'm good, Naran. Thanks so much for having me on.
No, thank you so much for joining us. So COVID hits and your life changes. Can you let's start from there. What happens?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I think COVID was a real eye opener for a lot of people. You start to reevaluate your life, your decisions, what to do with all of that time that you're at home. And from a financial perspective, right, a lot of people were lost their jobs or had their incomes reduced significantly. So that was certainly an issue. Others actually did really well during COVID. If you're entrepreneurial, there were opportunities to be had. So it was a very interesting time, I think. And certainly the work from home stuff, the flexibility that came from, being in that situation, all of the tools that were developed as a result. So I think I mean, there's certainly significant negatives, but there are also a lot of positives that came from that, in that I think it has become even easier to become an entrepreneur.
And now you're on your entrepreneur. I often say that COVID opened up this floodgate. Everybody was an entrepreneur, right? Because
Exactly.
everybody's at home collecting free money, and now post COVID, the real entrepreneurs are still steady of beating the pathway and moving forward. And I'm not saying that to be a knock. I'm just trying to. That's my simple attempt at humor. Anyway, anyway, so you get into this unique business. It's not unique, but only a certain percentage of people can actually provide the services that you provide for solopreneurs. Can you talk to our audience about what it is that you help solopreneurs navigate through?
Okay, so I started my business in 2008. And I worked in Bermuda in corporate accounting for a long time. And there came a point when I was just much more interested in interacting with small business owners and helping them, right? Like, so look, largely what I did was as an accountant and a tax advisor. So I was a person that if you're a very small business, you would come to me and I would help you with all aspects, all of the financial aspects of your business. And so, but in doing so, what the part of it that I really enjoyed was helping to educate on entrepreneurs, solopreneurs to understand their finances because so many of them just don't. And it's not big. I mean, a lot of these people are highly intelligent people, but there's a block, right? There's just these limiting money beliefs. That's, become the terminology for it. And it's just this irrational fear of money. And so in the past couple of years, I've actually pivoted my business to focus less on the compliance and the accounting and more on educating small business owners on how to understand, manage their finances. And this doesn't mean that they shouldn't have an accountant or all of the people that you mentioned in your introduction, because I think that's really important. But I think it is essential to have an understanding of your own finances so that the stories that we hear about the celebrities that get taken by their accountants or whoever their financial managers doesn't happen to you because you're on top of it.
One of the first things that I learned in business, like dealing with major projects, is having that project manager. I would advise people when they were doing large projects in their home. I said, well, you need two contractors. You need the contractor that's going to work by your side. And you need to pay them because they're going to be there to manage day to day operations, not as a taskmaster over the contractor that you hire, but so that the language barrier can emerge and he can call if he hears BS, can call BS, or but you need to have someone in your team on your side that's going to help you to navigate through something that you don't really know or experience. Is that kind of what it is that you're saying too, a little bit? Well,
Absolutely. And look, it's very intimidating. Money is very intimidating to most people, like to people who don't have a background in it, and completely understandable. So even though a lot of it, in my opinion, a lot of it is common sense. I often say it's not rocket science. It isn't, but there's this fear that you're going to make the wrong decision, so you just don't do anything. So to have a partner, someone as you mentioned, that you're accountable to, someone who has some knowledge, some, experience, who can say, yeah, that makes sense, right? Like, I think you should go ahead and do that to encourage you to take control of your money in ways. And then what happens over time is that you build confidence, right? As voice a decision that you're planning to make, and the person, your accountability partner or your accountant or whoever your financial manager says, yeah, like that absolutely makes sense. And then you are able to build on that and recognize the terminology, the jargon, understanding that money, really, when it comes down to it, is just not that complicated.
what are some of the biggest mistakes that we as small business solopreneurs make? If you can give me a few.
And that's such a great question. And the biggest mistake, just broadly speaking, is not trying to understand your
Hmm.
money, right? Like, and so it doesn't matter. You might have the best financial manager around, but still, if you do not understand your own finances, then you're missing a big part of the picture, right? If you're just like, should I invest in this endeavor, right? Like, should I do this thing? Is it worth it? It may sound great. And maybe you're making, $1 million in sales, but you're actually spending $1 million in costs, right? So it's really not that profitable. So understanding the difference between revenue and profit is, obviously, I think very, very important. And so again, some of the mistakes are that people don't really sort of uh like take understand the basics. And so taxes are really important, and again, taxes are complex. Like, I'm not saying that everyone needs to understand every aspect of their taxes, but you should have an overall understanding of what your tax liabilities are going to be. So one of the big mistakes, especially as a sole proprietor, or sorry, an entrepreneur, I'm from Canada, but I'm sure it's the same in the US, is you can estimate how much you're going to owe in tax, right?
Mm.
But you have to put it aside. Like, you're not necessarily paying the government off of every paycheck. So you need to set up a savings account. That is really important, to put that money aside and know that you can't spend it. Otherwise, you're going to get into trouble with the IRS. In Canada, it's from me, Canada. This is really important, I think.
One of the other things that I had to learn the hard way is really paying yourself, because even if you're going for a small business loan, the person on the other side of the table is not going to tell you. But if they don't see an expenditure for you, even if it's $100, $1, whatever it is that you already have in place, that you this is what you're going to pay yourself, and then have an idea of how you're going to increase that if as the business increase, because they want to make sure that you're not going to take the money. Let's talk a little bit about about that, and am I off, or is that really really important?
Yeah, well, so like paying yourself is essential, and you have to build that into. So it may look like, and there's several different aspects of this from which we can discuss. And one of them is that your business may look profitable just based on revenues and costs, but if you don't incorporate a salary into that, whether it's a proper salary or a dividend or some mechanism of paying yourself, you're not seeing the full picture of your business. So that's really important. Obviously, you have to pay yourself in order to live, right? And to exist. And so often I advise people to pay themselves the market value of what they would pay an employee to do their job, right? Like, at least that's the basic, that's the baseline of what and then they would increase it because they're doing way more than an employee would. And they're also an owner. And so as their business improves, they can take more, but deciding how much you're going to pay yourself is, again, essential. And in the early stages of your business, it can be difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're still, right, you're very new, you may not be profitable at all, and so you don't necessarily want to take up more than the business can handle. But you should keep that in mind with every and that's why, again, it's so important to know your numbers, right? You can't go to your accountant every single time. You want to look at your profitability and see, okay, how much can I take from the business? These are decisions that you have to make yourself. And one other thing that I'm going to point out with respect to banks, because I think this is really important, is that a bank, when they're giving you a loan, sometimes a mortgage, right? Because a lot of, obviously, small business owners have their personal side, they'll look at your tax return, right? To see how much you earned. And if you're not paying yourself enough, then you may not be able to get a mortgage or a loan, even though there's more than enough money in the business. So these are things to keep in mind as well. You need to strike the right balance, I think.
Yeah, I've seen that where people put so much emphasis on building the corporate credit, doing all these other things, and they allow their personal credit and their personal things to go down. Sometimes you can get along where the business can carry it, but in sometimes they just want to see, let me see the executives and how they look and how they pay their personal bills. When you are crafting your courses and you are thinking your avatars through and who it is that you're reaching out to, what are some of the things that you take into consideration when you say, okay, this is going to be good for 2025, this may be good for end of year, this may, like, how do you navigate through that? Can you please share with me your process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I tend to focus on specific topic areas that are relevant to the time of year, obviously. And so, from my perspective, one of the big areas and the areas that people reach out to me for are knowledge at this point, just understanding how it works. And here in Canada, there's a couple of components of that. There's sales tax, there's paying yourself is a big one, right? How to structure that, and then year-end taxes and how do you deal with that. And so it's important. There's certain steps that you would take at certain times of the year, but you also want to be prepared throughout the year. So a really important one is to, and I touched on this before, is to make sure you're saving enough for taxes throughout the year. So that's something you'd want to do, throughout the year. At the end of the year, if you're planning to have an accountant do your taxes, you want to line up your accountant in advance, right? Of that. So that's, knowledge. And so something that I like webinars that I'll do will be around how to prepare for your accountant, or if you're interested in doing your own taxes as a sole proprietor, they're not that complicated in Canada. You can. And so how to do them. And tax software these days is amazing, right? It really helps you through the steps. So I'll show them how to approach their tax, or at least understand their tax returns. What are the major ones? Because people will look at a tax return and be like, yeah, this makes no sense. I'm not even going to look at it. So it's again just taking them through it, simplifying the jargon around tax and accounting because there's so much of it. But really, when you translate it, it's just very simple. It's money in, it's money out, money you have to pay to the government, right? And then there's, tax rates and how do you decipher those? So those are the types of things. I also do a year-end tax planning webinar every year. So in December, just things that you can do before the end of the year to ensure that you're in good shape for the following year.
Staying in the vein of taxes, a lot of us miss the opportunity to take advantage of some of the tax credits that our governments may be giving us. How can us how can someone actually, what are some of the things that you teach to help them prepare to take advantage of those lessons? Because we pay here, I think it's 35 cents to the dollar in taxes, and that may be a little bit higher now, but
Yeah,
in a few months
it's high.
it might be 70 cents to the dollar in a couple of months. But anyway, I think we're paying like 35 cents. But there are things that we can do to offset some of those costs. And
Absolutely.
when you hear the phrase that being a solopreneur or a small business owner, you get a chance to really position yourself where you can spend the money in the right way so that you don't have to give it to the government. Is that a kind of true formality, or is that too simple?
Look, I think absolutely. So, first of all, as a solopreneur, unlike an employee of a corporation, if you're an employee of a business, right, you go, you do your work, you get a paycheck, right, done. As a solopreneur, you're taking risk. You're actually building a business, right? So, as a consequence of that, you are going to be spending money to advance your business. And so, many of those expenses spend directly on your business with some exceptions, and there's always exceptions, are referred to expenses, really write-offs, deductions, that's what people call them. And those can be offset against the sales that you make in your business. And there's a lot, like again, so in Canada, I'm sure it's the same in the US, the overriding rule is that if you incur an expense to earn income in your business, you can deduct it, right? And so, I mean, common expenses include rent and salaries, like office expenses, dues, and there's so many dues and subscriptions. So, like, I have like Dropbox and Zoom and Google Drive, and, people have industry specific subscriptions. These are all deductible. And there's other softer expenses. So, you might be able to deduct a portion of your internet, for example. You might be able to deduct a portion of your telephone costs. Your home, if you work from your home, a lot of solopreneurs do, you can deduct a portion of that as well. And again, these are not necessarily available to employees, but they're absolutely available to solopreneurs because this is what it takes to earn income as a business owner. So that's a primary way in which you're going to reduce your taxes. Again, legitimate business expenses. Paying yourself a salary is often a deductible expense. And then sometimes the other aspect is that there might be, it depends, there might be tax credits available for specific programs. You might be able to get grants or loans, so at lower interest rates. So those are things that are worth looking into. And right now, going to Google or even ChatGPT, right? Like you can say, well, this is my situation. Is there anything that's available to me in my area that I can take advantage of? So that's what I would recommend.
Last one or two, and I'm gonna get you out of here. Thank you so much. This was a wonderful and informative conversation.
I'm so glad.
We hear the phrase often, like other people money or good debt and bad debt. When you're sitting down and you're writing or you're putting classes together and you're showing them the differences between good debt and bad debt, can you take us through one or two things that we should consider when we're thinking about taking a loan or thinking about how to structure that good versus bad?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so, and it's such a, this is one of the most misunderstood areas because, again, coming back to limiting money beliefs, many of us, including myself, believe that debt is bad,
Hmm.
right? And so, but debt is not bad. Debt, in fact, can be excellent, especially in a business context where it allows you to grow your business. So, when you are taking on a small business loan, for example, it's really important to understand to use the money to grow your business, to reinvest in your business. If you're taking out a loan just to spend on personal things, obviously that's a bad idea. That is bad debt. But good debt will allow you to grow, to expand your business, bring in more revenue, right? And the cost of the debt is low, right? I mean, it's not very, very low necessarily, but even at a, 10% interest rate, say like that's what you're paying, that's deductible to the business, and your return on investment can be, in fact, very high if you use the debt well. If you use it to grow and reinvest your business, you earn a profit that is significantly higher than the 10% or higher even than the 10% that you're paying allows you to really leverage that debt, like to take advantage of that debt. And so it is important to, again, know your numbers, put that in the context of a profit and loss statement, see what the debt, how you can grow it, how much profit you'll make, what the costs of the debt are. And again, I know this is complicated. It helps to have a partner to help you, like a financial manager and accountant, but still, like, you can do it yourself, and to see what the impact of taking that debt on is. So it is a good idea. Responsibility and discipline are absolutely essential, though, I think, in that context.
Yeah, and I like the way that you said just taking on understanding before you go out and get the money. Where during COVID, they were giving the money expecting you to already have a wherewithal. And we saw, you know, some people now are still paying the the debt for taking that loan.
Totally, totally. And look, I mean, the financial crisis, right, of 2008 and all of that stuff preys on the ignorance of the common person. And it's, so they're just giving out mortgages to anybody who, without, people don't understand like what the responsibilities are. No one's telling them what they are, and then their houses got foreclosed on, right? Like it was a huge disaster. And so it is really important. And what can you do? Obviously they have a responsibility, I think, right, to be able to educate the people who are taking these loans. But you, the person who's taking the loan, so much information out there, right?
Yeah,
Your podcast, right? So many podcasts, so many YouTube channels, whatever. Understand in advance, and don't feel afraid, don't feel intimidated, because it's really not, once you understand it, it's just, I don't think it's that difficult to do.
that was a great point during the bubble, the bubble age, because I, I
Yes.
I was in construction business and doing real estate lightly, and I was working with real estate office, and the agents were running in trying to get to thing at first, and I'm reading. I keep up with financial news and stuff. Not a lot of the fluffy stuff, but some real. And I'm like, they're talking about some bubble coming. I don't know. Like maybe you guys should be thinking about holding instead of these quick flips. And one day, all the guys were just sitting in the office. No more traffic. Houses
Exactly.
houses incomplete, and everything just turned on a dime. And I said that to ask, we may be facing some financial uncertainties right now coming up. How does one prepare so that they're not just sitting in the office and looking around? Because there are some people that were able to navigate through the bubble, and although they had to flex a little bit, they were okay because they had someone like you on their side. And this is not to end on a doom and gloom. This is to end on an information, because this is what we are. We help
Absolutely.
you evolve your lives. What would you say to some persons that maybe, from what it is that you're hearing in the industry, what are some of the things that we should be considering and thinking about?
So look, I think it's really important because there's always uncertainty. There's always financial uncertainty out there. And obviously in the US right now, there's a bit of it. There's just always is. And so again, it's important not to panic and not to make decisions rashly, right? Not to say, okay, I'm going to sell my entire stock portfolio because the market went down by 10%. And it can, sometimes in 1 or 2 days, right? It just plummets. And the smart thing to do is to not sell, is to sit and evaluate your situation. Is it short term? Are we going to come back from it? We came back. I mean, there's been a lot of events, the financial bubble, 9/11, right? Like the recent one, the COVID. And these are and a good mindset is to say, okay, maybe this is a buying opportunity. Like, is it the end of the world? And if you look at the history of the stock market specifically, you'll see, it'll go down and it'll be way up. Like we're at an all-time high right now, right? And so people who would have sold would have missed out on it because they took rash decisions. There's times that you have to, right? Because maybe you don't have the money, you need some of it, but you be careful and considered and disciplined. Get advice if you can from an accountant, from someone who knows, and consume information. Education is so important to understand, I think, what you should do in that situation and recognize human beings are very uncomfortable with uncertainty. And so we tend to not know, we want to take control. And so we want to take an action. But that action needs to be considered before. I think that's so important, right? Just recognize that you have to, I mean, not to get too philosophical, but you have to live, like life is about uncertainty. And you kind of have to live with that in your life and do things in keeping with that.
Well, there you have it, everybody. I told you we like to have conversations to help you evolve your life. And not only that, we don't just talk to anybody, we sit you at the feet of the masters. Listen, all of the information, Ronika's information, is in the description. Follow her on social media because she gives out great strategies. If you are a solopreneur, or you're considering, you need to consider your finances before you consider anything else. Understanding your customer as well. And I was taught to always talk about money before you start making money, because the more money you make, the harder the conversation. So even
That's a great point.
yeah. So even in our self-talk, we want to make sure that we're talking right and we're getting over these limited beliefs. I'm very open about the fact that I had these financial limiting beliefs that I had to overcome, and it's because of persons like our guest today that I'm able to do so. We don't ask you for cash apps, Venmos, or any of those things, but what we do ask is that you do support our guest one, and that you support us by going to our Instagram, liking everything is Walking Victory, our Facebook page, Walking Victory. We're going to start a group, And our website, walkinvictory.me. Our book is coming out. Our agent, we have some great partnerships and announcements that we're going to be announced. We're just finalizing contracts. I know you keep hearing me talking about it, but by the time you're listening, it may be done. We have our Pathway Back agent, and we have expanded it. We're going to be helping youth and young adults to prevent them from incarceration, as well as having something to help persons who are coming home to have a good pathway back, understanding their phones, understanding AI, because they're living in a totally different time, some of them, than when they went in. And we have something for everyone, and we just are excited. We do have a target market. I know that's something for everyone. It's too broad, but you understand what I'm saying. Don't walk with your head down. Don't walk making excuses. Together, we walk in victory. Our book will be out this fall, Awakening I Am. Told y'all we got a lot happening, and I thank you guys for your support. Hit like, share, and subscribe. Peace.